every episode
When we kill
with
the leaders
cheer.
of the audience,
Ramona
let him
leads the
know
way,
that we start
explaining
really
day by day.
In
In the world of digital streams, turning knowledge into dreams. Through the tales of old, new stories unfold.
Cast. My name is Ramana, MedBig's webcast. This is a healthcare channel, new kind of a channel. I interview quite a number of doctors, but first time I'm interviewing a fire chief of Fremont, really a trailblazer, and I am nervous. Let me tell you, that persona, your accomplishments always is an example to that. Well, Dr. Sorry, the fire chief Diaz. If I call you, that is, what do you want me to call you? Diaz, fire chief Diaz is
Oh,
okay.
Chief Diaz is fine. That's what most people call me.
Okay. Let me ask you your journey. You came to. I lived in New York City.
Mhm.
My formative years. I was in Brooklyn, and I went to school there, and then it's a very different world. You were in a. It's a very tough kind of situations in that place, and I lived in Brooklyn. So tell us your journey from New York City all the way around the other coast to Fremont. What led you to this whole journey for you?
I grew up in Harlem, New York, in a neighborhood that wasn't the safest. And my parents were very overprotective out of fear that something would happen to me. So I was very sheltered as a child growing up. And I decided that I wanted to go to college and I wanted to play softball. So I picked a school that was 3 hours away, SUNY Albany. I went to the State University of New York at Albany. And I lived there for 10 years. And during that time, I got a bachelor's degree where I double majored in psychology and Spanish. And I got a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. And while I was there for 10 years, that city is very similar to Oakland in the sense that things shut down at 2 o'clock. It's not fast paced like New York City. It was a lot safer for me being a woman growing up and really going to college and growing up in college because I didn't have those opportunities as a child in New York City. Playing on the softball team was pretty amazing. That was my passion. In fact, I just reunited with one of my teammates last week when I went to a conference in Dallas. She lives in Dallas. And, I had to really acclimate to an environment. I grew up in Harlem where it was predominantly people of color, Black, African Americans and Latino population. And then I went to a school where the population for Black and Brown people was about 2%. And so I had to acclimate to that environment. Playing sports really did it for me. It allowed me to have a team with a purpose. I graduated from undergraduate school. I got a job working at a group home. And I decided I wanted to continue to pursue my education and get a master's degree in counseling because I wanted to work with young people, adolescents. And so I got my master's degree, worked for a Job Corps, and then I decided I wanted to move back home. So I moved back to New York and realized that that's not where I wanted to, settle down. So I started visiting different places. I came to the Bay Area and fell in love with the Bay Area. And so at one point, I sold all of my things. I lived in Brooklyn as well. And I packed my bags and drove cross country. I landed in Denver for a little while and then down in Los Angeles. But the Bay Area is really where I wanted to live. I have friends who lived in Hayward. And my first job was working for DeVry University as a recruiter. And that was the first job that I got here. And my district was in Fremont. So it's full circle. I ended up back in Fremont towards the end of my career, but that's where I started working. Um, right around 9/11, right prior to that, I did a bike raid, the first AIDS bike ride fundraiser from San Francisco to LA. And I met a woman then who was pursuing a career in the fire service. She also happens to be from New York City. We became friends. I was looking for an apartment. I moved in across the hall from her. And so while she was going through this process of trying to get hired with the fire department, she got picked up with the Oakland Fire Department and invited me to her graduation. And that was the first introduction I had to the fire service. I was recruited at that point by members of the Oakland Black Firefighters Association who asked me, is this something you think you might be interested in doing? And so out of curiosity, I started attending a class that was put together by the Oakland Black Firefighters Association on what steps do you need to do and how do you become a firefighter. And there I met many of people that I networked with and had opportunities to learn more about the fire service. I applied for the Oakland Fire Department. I got hired with the Oakland Fire Department, and I spent 17 years there. For me, it was important to have the credibility of understanding everyone's position. And so I promoted to every rank in Oakland, from firefighter to paramedic, engineer, lieutenant, captain, battalion chief. And the last rank that I served in Oakland for just shy of a year was an assistant chief in charge of almost 600 members of the organization. And during the time that I got promoted to that position, I got promoted on a Friday. I started working Monday. And that was the first experience that Oakland had with the pandemic. We had the Princess ship land in the Port of Oakland, and immediately we went into opening up and activating the Emergency Operations Center and trying to figure out what we needed to do to take care of the members of that ship, but the members of our community and also the members of our organization.
Well, hold on one second. That's a very
Okay.
important thing you're saying. The princess ship came to the Oakland. You were the first one, first day you're dealing with this. We don't
Yes.
know what that disease is all about, COVID-19. You were in charge of that, princess. That is a monumental, that is a big news. Tell us a little bit about that. How you did that and how
Yeah.
you did it. That
I
is,
don't know how we did it. So I was the assistant chief at the time. So I had a boss. And the ranking system is fire chief in Oakland, deputy chief, and then assistant chief. I was in charge of 560 members of the Oakland Fire Department and 460 citizens. We didn't know anything about this pandemic, right? It caught many of us by surprise. So we were doing a lot of researching. We were watching the news. We had to develop protocols and policies to keep the members safe. And we had to do all of these things because we were essential workers. So we definitely had to come to work every day. And we thought that this would be a 2-week thing. And 2 years later, we're still dealing with the pandemic. It was a lot. In addition to dealing with the pandemic, we also had civil unrest as a result of the George Floyd incident. So we spent quite a bit of time in this EOC trying to mitigate fires that were being set, by protesters, as well as making sure that whatever policies we were putting together was protecting our members from being exposed to COVID.
I watched a lot of live shows from the Prince Williams. People are complaining. People are telling us how that journey was just fascinating, and everybody was glued to the TV, and everybody's watching. I didn't know that you are in charge of the whole process, and you're running the. That is a hats off to you. That is not a easy one because you must be facing pressures from every quarter. People want to get out. Politicians don't want them to be out in the public. Your community is pressure, and public health officials. You have to coordinate quite a bit of that's a coordination is like almost a dance of choreography, one of the best, best say that. How do you handle these enormous pressures from the different things? How did you handle
Yeah,
that?
it was very challenging. It was very challenging because no one knew what was going on. Information was changing on a weekly basis, faster than we can put out information to the members. So every time we would put out information, something would change the following week. So we had to revamp policies, and that was constant. At the time in Oakland, we didn't have the appropriate PPEs like N95 masks, gowns. We didn't have all of that equipment. So we're trying to coordinate with the county and the health department to try to acquire some of that equipment. But in the meantime, we had to figure out how to keep our members safe. Many times in Oakland, members were using the N95s for weeks at a time because we didn't have the equipment coming in. It was a huge coordinated effort with city leadership, who were all in that emergency operations center trying to figure out ways to get the logistical equipment that we needed to do our jobs day to day. And then the fear that it brought, right? We were seeing firsthand people were dying because we were going out to calls, to 911 calls, to treat those people. And we were finding out on a regular basis that people were dying. And many of my members have families of their own, including myself. I was taking care of my 88-year-old mom at the time. She might have been 87 at the time. And she had Parkinson's disease, right? So I had to make sure that she was protected when I came home, and it just was such an unknown. But I found myself on the phone constantly, dealing with designated infectious control officers. I became a designated control officer for my organization. And so I was getting calls constantly about this person was exposed, and now you have to do contact tracing to see how many people were exposed, send those people home. But what people don't understand is the more people we were sending home, the less people we had to go out and run the 911 calls.
Okay.
And so we were looking at things like, what do we need to do to ensure that we have, the level of service needed to run the calls that we were receiving in the 911 system.
You're in the middle of the pandemic, and then you came another wave of racial violence. That is, there's a George Floyd case, is a bursted out across the nation, including Atlanta I was in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What are the challenges you face? Now, you're a black woman, you're African Cuban. How do you convince people this injustice? You have a job to play, and you have a moral duty that is really conflicting. I wanted to ask you, it's a personal question, probably.
Yeah.
How do you compromise that personal thing?
I'm glad you
That's
asked.
really character. It tells.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because that was very challenging. So one of the things that I did was that I did not watch the video the entire time that we were running, the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. I didn't watch the video for a very long time. And then we're watching people who are extremely, upset. Many people that came to Oakland to protest weren't Oakland residents. They were people who would take the BART to come into Oakland, and they were destructive. So having conversations with people who were in that emergency operations center and trying to explain these aren't our citizens that also happen to look like me, was challenging. But when I did finally watch the video, and I think it was after 10 months where things started to settle, I cried for an extended period of time to hear that man beg for his mother. That was a very sad situation. But in the midst of it, you don't get to bring to work your personal views, your personal experiences, right? We have very strict rules and regulations and policies in which you don't discuss at work politics. You don't discuss religion at work. So trying to navigate that while still feeling what you're feeling is a challenge. Is a challenge. And so, a small group of us that were engaged in that for 10 months long, we try to find ways to release some of that, but it was difficult. It was a difficult time.
It is a difficult, so certainly a difficult time. What would you do that kind of situations? Calling mother, worrying about your mother because you're in public, and going back to see your mother is a big problem, and then that is also added a pressure to you, the family members. Is that
Oh,
right?
yes, because my goal was, I cannot expose my mom to COVID
Yeah.
because she was, 87 years old with pre-existing, health conditions, and she would not have survived that. And fortunately, she never got COVID. She never got it. I got COVID. My partner got COVID. My wife got COVID. And we still had to take care of my mom, but we wore masks. We ventilated the house. We sprayed the house, and we try to keep my mom protected, and we were successful in that. But that was very scary. And so, that's the other thing, me being someone who comes from a mental health background as a social worker for 15 years, I'm understanding that people are being traumatized at work, right? We're essential workers, we're frontline workers, we're seeing people die pretty consistently. But and we're being forced to work on a regular basis because our staffing is down, and somebody has to be there for the calls. And so, that part right there was very challenging to witness, that at the time for that organization, we didn't have the resources to be able to provide the mental health, care that's needed. And Oakland went through a significant amount of incidents that were very violent. The ghost ship was another incident that was experienced in Oakland, and I was a battalion chief at the time, where 36 people died, right? And so members of the organization had to dig out bodies, from debris, so that their family members.
Can you remind that what is a ghost? Yeah, I have vaguely remember, but tell us.
Sure. So the ghost ship fire was an incident that occurred in the Fruitvale district, and it was a large warehouse that was converted into a live workspace. And they had a party there where a bunch of young people attended. There was a collapse and there was a fire, and 36 people died during that time.
Okay.
And members of the Oakland Fire Department had to respond to the fire. They weren't able to make entry. There was a whole slew of things that obviously resulted in 36 people losing their lives. And then once the fire was placed under control, those same members of that organization had to go and remove debris, just to find bodies, so that the family members, could lay their loved ones to rest.
You have two opposition parties in that sense. One of them is the people who are going through a black community that going through a trauma with George Foster. The other one is anti-vaxxers. You have two of them friends coming on you. How do you handle that? Those two things is a very different different approach and offensive for you, and two attacks on you. How do you handle those kind of things?
Well, that the people, you're saying the people who are being vaccinated and those who are against vaccination.
Correct.
So that didn't really come into effect in Oakland while I was there. When I moved over to Fremont, in Fremont, we had some members who did not want to get vaccinated. And so what we did was that those individuals who did not want to get vaccinated had to be tested during COVID before they started their shift. And so the day that they returned to work, they needed to be tested. If they tested positive, we would send them home. And so that's the way that we handle that situation in Fremont.
Let me ask you. Then after that, you moved to Fremont, and then Fremont has its own crisis went on,
Mhm.
mayor and all those things during the lockdowns, and they want to open the businesses. Some people don't want to open the businesses. How did you handle that whole process?
So for me, thankfully, whether businesses are open or not, the fire department still has to come to work. So for us, it wasn't very impactful in that regard. We're essential workers, so we've been there, every day. We've been going to work. When I moved over to Fremont, there was a period of time in which there weren't a lot of cases of COVID, but then new strains started to come in. And so we had to do the same thing, which was put policies in place. We were very fortunate to have a PCR testing equipment in which we can test people who have signs and symptoms and in 20 minutes get the results in Fremont. So I was grateful to be able to have the tools in Fremont to determine in a quick way whether someone had COVID or not. But we continue the practices, and having done it for 560 people as part of the Oakland Fire Department, when I came to Fremont, right now I'm in charge of 172 people. Then it was roughly 150. It was less impactful. And we also at that point had a lot of the personal protective equipment that was needed for the members to go out. It was just a matter of communicating to those individuals. And we did have a moment in time where there was several people who were exposed and at home quarantined, but it never got to the point where we had to reduce our level of service.
Let me ask you a question that you are going through. Then you moved to Fremont. You found a different crisis, and my mayor was attacked, and all the businesses wanted to open. How did you handle that situation? What kind of incident plans? I saw that
Mhm.
you would use incident plans. What are
Mhm.
the incident plans?
The incident plans are pretty much um, not necessarily related to that. We put incident action plans together for any large scale event in which there's going to be a large number of people visiting the city of Fremont. Um, and so we'll collaborate with PD, we'll collaborate with traffic, with public works to ensure that we're able to put ourselves in a position that if we need to respond to an incident, we have an incident commander, is usually unified, where you have someone from PD and fire in one place together, and you identify who's going to be in charge of different areas while we're in that operational period, right? So what does that mean? In Fremont, sometimes we'll have activities in which we'll have bike medics or medics on scooters so that they can easily get from one area of the event, like Festival of the Arts, and then we'll have engine companies who are positioned in such a way with ambulances that if we have to go in for a medical call, we can easily have someone deployed, stabilize that patient, and then bring them in golf carts outside of that area where there's a large population of people, transport them to the hospital. So those are the types of incident action plans that we've worked on. If we have a major fire, it's the same thing. You put people in certain positions so that they're supervising those areas, so that you can easily mitigate that incident.
Just let back a very strange thing you used on scooters. The emergency people are going on scooters. What that mean? I never seen that. Tell us a little bit about the scooters part of it.
Yeah, so we have medics with equipment that they put on backpacks, and a lot of times the large scale incidents, the large scale events that we have, you have thousands of people in that area, so it makes it very challenging for you to be able to take an engine, to the location of where that patient is. So what we do in Fremont is that we have paramedics who have the medical equipment that they carry on their backpacks. They ride on a bike or they'll get on a scooter and they get deployed. They have radios, so they're in communication with the dispatch center. Anytime somebody calls 911, they'll identify the location of the patient. They go because they're paramedics and they're trained in advanced life support to try to stabilize that patient if they need to, or extract that patient. We also have golf carts in which you can transport a patient if you need to. So the medics on scooters will get there. They'll kind of do an assessment to determine what's needed. And then if a golf cart can get to that location, the golf cart will come. They'll take that patient out to where there's an ambulance on the street side or the perimeter of where the event is. And then the patient gets transported to the hospital.
Do they have a defibrillator, like a jump start they can give? What kind of equipment they can give, a EpiPen kind of a thing? The basic stuff they can do that, and from the scooter.
Not from the scooter.
Mhm.
Not from the scooter, because what we have, what's called the Lucas device. Are you familiar with that? It's
Yeah.
a cardiopulmonary assisting CPR. It's like it does mechanical compressions for
Okay.
people who are having a cardiac event, right? Who are coding. That's a pretty large piece of equipment. We have a Pelican box that has all kinds of medicines, so that if you have a patient that's in cardiac arrest, we have epi, we have atropine, we have a certain number of medications that we can administer to the patient to either get pulses back, um, hopefully to get pulses back so that you can transport the patient once they've been stabilized. In an event like that, a paramedic on a bike or on a scooter is not going to be able to do that. They're just there to try to get some information about what we have and what do we need. And then on the radio, they're communicating to the people who are on the golf cart or an ambulance, if they can get the ambulance to that location. They're communicating with them what they have and what we need. And we carry that equipment on the, not on the scooters, but on the golf carts, the ambulance, the engines, and the trucks.
During this festival of Globe I attended, it's not that bad, but heat wave is a big problem. Last few days, the citizens experience a lot of
Mhm,
heat wave. So
mhm.
how do you fire department respond to these heat waves that people are getting sunstrokes and all kind of things? So what do you do in the fire department?
So that's a great question. Most of the times, those are the types of calls that we respond to when we have a event of that magnitude outdoors and the temperatures are high. Sometimes we'll have a first aid tent embedded in the event. Sometimes we'll have water stations throughout. And a lot of times, what we do is that we'll remove that individual from the heat and put them in a place where they can cool down. If it gets to the point where they're approaching a heat stroke, something significant, obviously we're going to transport them to the hospital and provide whatever interventions are necessary based on the assessment that's being done by the paramedics on scene.
So, fire department, a lot of people don't know this. My son had when he was 4 years old in Atlanta, that he swallowed a glass, a small piece of
Mhm.
glass, and
Mhm.
we were my mother is his mother is panic, and we call the 911. The first people showed up is a fire department,
Mhm.
and really they solve the problem. People don't know that how many times fire department really do medical calls. Last time when I was listening your lecture, I was shocked that your medical calls are almost 50% of the calls are medical calls. uh,
80% actually. 80% of our calls are medical calls.
Oh my God, that
Mhm.
is just a staggering number. So how do you do that? And fire department, nobody thinks fire department. They think hospital is responding. Actually, life and death you're deciding through the fire department. We need to really public needs to understand how important is the fire department plays a crucial role in saving life, life and death situations. Explain to us a little bit for the public.
Sure. So every fire department, well, not everyone, but most fire departments, especially in this county, will have at least one paramedic, and that paramedic is trained in an advanced life support. So they have to understand, medications. They have to understand reading EKGs. They have to know how to, shock a member if necessary, how to start IVs, how to intubate people. So firefighters who are paramedics will go to school for 2 years to receive that training. It starts with the didactic portion of it, the classroom portion of it, and then it goes, once they complete that, they have to take a test to graduate from that portion of it. Then they go to clinicals. So they get to go to the hospitals and they serve as an emergency medical service technician at the hospital. And then when they complete that portion of it, they go and do an internship on an ambulance where they're responding on an ambulance to 911 calls. When they finish all of that, they get their paramedic license. And then for Alameda County, you have to be accredited to be able to work on your own by yourself without having a supervisor on an engine or a truck. So we have on every engine and truck in the city of Fremont at least one paramedic. In most cases, we have two. Some cases we have three. So there's a lot of critical tasks that need to happen when you have a patient who's in cardiac arrest, like start a line, draw the meds, put them on the EKG monitor, put the Lucas on, intubate the patient, read the rhythm. There's a lot of things that need to happen. And so the more people that you have with advanced life support skills, the better the outcome is for the patient. So why firefighters often are first on scene is because we are strategically placed around every city for every jurisdiction that we have to respond and get on scene between 3 to 6 minutes. And that's key because we know if you go without oxygen for a certain amount of time, the likelihood of you surviving that decreases, or you might have some deficits as a result of it. So fire stations are strategically placed throughout a city to be able to respond within a certain timeline.
They're truly first defense of healthcare. People do not understand. The ambulance sometimes gets stuck, but fire departments have a 3 to 6 minutes of that. What you're saying is the first line of defense for the healthcare system. I think we need a lot more resources to that. But so it's the first kind of defense that you do you need a lot more resources for the fire department, because this is one thing public need to be educated. Life and death questions, really fire department plays an extremely crucial role. And that's why you can maybe understand in the policy level, but a lot of times public needs to understand also this problem. Some of the doctors may not understand all these things. So it's an interesting aspect. I wanted to ask you then the other part of the fire rescue. People start the fire, and in India we had a different kind of situation. They were there's a huge problem now that they passed a law. They were burning the wives, putting the gasoline on them, and because of dowry situations and all those things. Thank God that don't happen in this country. So when you see this kind of a fire and catching fire, and you're jumping you're taking such a huge risk when you go inside. 9/11 is an example how many firefighters died. How do you do that courage? And then I'm sacrificing life there. I'm going there inside. There is a child is burning. It is a huge, tremendous responsibility. Just pops on, immediately jumps on you. How do you, as a firefighter, really think about that?
So, we're a team, right? We have somebody who's driving the engine to get us to the location where we need to get there. But even before that, we have somebody who's activating the 911 system. And then we have dispatchers who are taking the call to let us know what it is. that we're responding to. If it's a fire, if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, we know that potentially there's people in the home sleeping. So, it's training. We spent as an entry level firefighter, I spent 6 months in an academy to learn these things so that they become second nature, right? How to make a connection to a hydrant, how to open up a hose line, make sure that there's no kinks in it so that it doesn't impede the flow and the pressure at the tip of that hose line. These are all things that you learn so that when that call comes in at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, it's almost second nature for you to be able to do the things to put everything in place so that we can go into a house, do a search. We receive training on all of that. We search the home to make sure that it's clear. Then we send the second crew in to do a backup search, to a secondary search, to make sure that the first crew didn't miss anything, because their primary responsibility is to find where the fire is and put water on the fire. Then we have the truck companies who are, on the roof, and they have to cut a hole to create some relief to allow those gases to escape so it won't be so hot in those buildings. We wear the proper PPEs to protect ourselves. But to your point, you're absolutely right. We understand that our job is high risk, right? We do this career knowing that any day that we go to work could be the last day, right, that our family members see us. But that's what we signed up to do. That's what we swore to do. That if we could save a life, we're going to do everything we need to do to save that life.
We have California is famous for fires. This is all over the place. So when the fire just starts out, your first responsibility is the people to rescue, right? And
Always.
Always people to rescue. Then they attend the fire. That is also responsibility of the fire department, not like a police or some hospitals. Actually, fire department take them out from the dangerous situations, and then they deal with the fire. Is that?
That's correct. So oftentimes when we in Fremont have what we call a confirmed working fire, the dispatch center will dispatch on confirmed working fires an ambulance to stand by for the citizens that we're responding to and for at a fire. And then they also send another ambulance in the event one of our members goes down. So it's really a coordinated, effort to make sure that if we do find a body inside of the building, we have to pull that body out. We have to make notifications to the incident commander. We found the body, we're pulling them out, have the medical team meet us in front of the building. And then whoever is pulling that body out has to then pass it on over to the medical team. And then they bring out all of the medical equipment, to try to resuscitate that individual if they need to be resuscitated. If they've been burned, we try to maintain those burns clean and transport them to a specialized hospital to take care of them. If we need to make sure that they're breathing, if they're not breathing on their own, those are all of the things that we learn when we go to EMT and paramedic school. But yes, we do both. Our primary responsibility is to, protect life, right, and property. So our goal is, if we're going into a building fire, is to search it as quickly as possible and make sure that if there's any bodies inside, we have to pull them out and notify that we have bodies, right?
Are you responsible for the carbon monoxide poisoning? Do you attend those things? Carbon monoxide or radon or something like that?
Yes, we respond to all 911 calls. We get alarms sometimes, carbon monoxide alarms. Fremont has a large industrial area, obviously, and we have a lot of hazardous materials. We have lithium batteries. We respond to vehicle accidents, hazmats, all of it. And we have members in our organization that not only they specialize in it, but they have to maintain continuing education and training. So we have refreshers just to keep us, dialed in on our skill set, so that when we do get those calls, we're able to respond and mitigate it as quickly as possible.
Other aspect of it, we always think firefighters are strong. They don't have any problems. They can exhibit, very frontal images that they're strong. They're not easy to bend, but they go through a lot of emotional crisis. They do a lot of, they see a lot of things that we don't see usually in public. Child burning, or a wife is burning, mother is burning, and he cannot help it anymore. And he saw that kind of incidents, how profoundly affect the firefighters in that sense.
Man, I can tell you that it takes an emotional toll. There used to be a point in time in which, cardiac issues was high, incidents in the fire service, substance and alcohol abuse. Not too long ago, the International Association of Firefighters started to acknowledge that there is such a thing as post-traumatic, injury, right? So those are all things that we're trained as firefighters, that when an incident occurs, you just have to respond to that incident, take care of the patient, and then you transfer care, right? Either to the hospital, the transporting agency, and then you're done. You go to the next one. And so when you're constantly having that type of exposure, the average person may experience in their lives 4 to 6 deaths. I took a course in which I learned that the average firefighter in their career will experience anywhere from 400 to 600 deaths. So you're constantly being exposed to it. Most of us will try to compartmentalize it. That only lasts for so long. You need to receive some type of mental health, care. And being a social worker, and having been a social worker, for 15 years, I understand the value of it. Yeah. It has to be a very specialized group of people who understand the trauma that public safety individuals are exposed to. When I started in the fire service, I can tell you, I've been in this for 20 years. I can vividly recall every single incident that was traumatic to me. I could vividly recall it. I can remember the first hanging that I went to. I remember very clearly the details of the first suicide by, freeway. I mean, I can tell you every single call that I've been to that has impacted me and my psyche. And so what I am grateful for now is that there's been enough attention drawn to it. I have had friends who have committed suicide who are firefighters. So mental health is significant. And in the fire service and with police and paramedics and EMTs that transport, doctors even, especially during the pandemic, right? The exposure and that injury that you receive, you have to have an outlet. So I am very thankful that the city leadership, my boss, Karina Shackelford, and the council members during a budget, proposal approved Fremont receiving specialized trauma therapy and counseling services for our members. And I've been told prior to this, the fire department started doing what's called critical incident stress debriefing for the citizens, but also for the members of the organization, run by members of the organization. We then went to peer support in the fire service. Well, all of those individuals who are listening to stories about what a member just experienced are also being exposed to that same trauma. And so it's just cyclical, right? We're having our own members provide some type of care to the members who have experienced PTSD or PTSI, and then we're exposing them to that same trauma. And I know this to be the case because when I experienced the first hanging and I went to see a therapist who had no knowledge of what I did as a firefighter, I can see the reaction in how I was describing the incident that I just experienced. So I'm thankful that
I don't want to listen to that experience. It could be is a very, very brutal and very,
yes,
very emotional. I can
yes.
imagine.
I'm just very excited though that that we have that the fire service is now looking at the benefits of providing mental health services to members of the fire service.
Another aspect of the fire department is the overdose. You have a lot of overdose patients all over the Silicon Valley. They do prescription drugs, over prescription drugs. They do shooting all these fentanyl. How do you? This is another aspect of the all these problems you have. This is another added problem. How do you respond to that? Do you have any task force separate for that, or the fire department is a part of the fire department problem?
Oh, we respond to people who are who have overdosed all the time. um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just part of, identifying if there's somebody on scene. Do they know what the person took? By looking at their eyes, do they have pinpoint eyes? We do an assessment to try to figure it out. We'll draw blood to determine if it's a, blood sugar issue. We just rule out things. But if there's somebody on scene who can tell us what's going on with that individual, that's helpful. Otherwise, we just treat them by ruling things out, transport them to the hospital.
You don't administer Narcan or anything like that.
We do. We have Narcan.
Narcan, okay.
We do.
So, are there any funding? You do special screening tests. You were talking about on the day you went through all your firefighters. You got the physical done, mental health evaluation done. So help them better to understand. Is there any grants available? Or donations? People should do that for you. I think it is invaluable what you all do. It is, I don't even know. I'm in a healthcare field. I don't even know what you all do. It is really, you play such a critical and role in the nation, and think much. You need to be really elevated over respect, and community has to recognize that this process. Tell us a little bit how you can apply grants and getting these people. We have a misunderstanding about firefighters. They think they sit down and cook in the daytime. They could make all the food and eat all the food, but it's not. It's a part of it maybe, but it's not really. However good cooks they are, it is really a lot of challenges that they have to face through.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of challenges, and we have the city supports us, in terms of our operating budget, but we also have people who write grants for us. Within the organization, we have a management analyst, and she's great. So any type of FEMA grant that's available, she'll apply for based on what the needs are. So to begin with, I've been with Fremont for 3 years now. So 3 years ago, she wrote a grant for what's called LifeScan, which is you're familiar with LifeScan. So we were able to, for 2 years, that grant was used to do life scans for all of our members. And we got all of our line personnel who are out in the IDLH environment, we got them, with the exception of 2 people, to all go through that testing process. And that was amazing for me because we were able to identify early on members who had potential masses with, cancer, that they had to follow up with their doctors, and it ended up with a positive outcome. It was great to see that everyone was really invested in it. The second year is the same. We had, an outpouring of member also participate in it. And you can see that there was some improvements. We had one member who was a probationary firefighter, where they found that he had cancer, He went to see his doctor, and he was able to be treated. And with cancer, I had a dad who died of fourth stage lung cancer. If you don't get it early on, and even when you do get it early on, the outcome isn't always the best. But for this probationary firefighter, he's still undergoing treatment. And so, we were very, very happy about being able to bring that through a grant. And then last year, the city of Fremont, I put in a proposal, a budget proposal, and they granted me the opportunity to include that as an annual budget item to take care of our members in that way. So it's important for us to be able to continue to deliver the type of service that's required and deserving of our citizens in Fremont, to also take care of the memberships, physical and mental health, because all of that affects your ability, to do your job.
With all these pressures, you're doing all these things. What do you do for your relaxation, Chief?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Or you go to park. What do you do?
I enjoy reading books. I love to read books on leadership. I love to read, personal growth books. I like to listen to music. My wife and I like to travel. So those are some of the things that we do.
What music you listen? Yeah, let me ask you.
I listen to Afro beats. I like Afro beats. I like jazz music.
Like Jamaican music.
I like Jamaican, Caribbean music, all kinds of Caribbean music. I grew up listening to salsa and merengue. I dance to that music. It lives in me. So those are some of the things that I like to do. I like to work on projects too around my house. I don't do it as much anymore because I don't have the time, but I like to work with my hands. So
it's truly an honor to talk with you. It's my privilege. One of my best career of my talking. I had more than 300 guests. You're one of the truly admired guests that I have. Sorry, I have technical problem, but we solved it, and we came back with the good questions, and you answered beautiful. You answered beautifully all the questions, and I think you educated all of us. The fire department's role. We have a very limited understanding of that on the general public. I think you are a true leader. I think you keep going, and this could take to the international level also, because we are way behind all these things. If you go to the India rural areas, you have no clue.
yes.
It's like you flip a coin if you're living or dead. So you're really truly. You need to visit the countries in Africa, India.
Yes. All things on my bucket list.
So you should. I think you could not only just visiting them and really giving them pure advice is absolutely needed. Thank you, Chief Diaz. I am truly honored. You're one of the true leaders of this Silicon Valley community, and I'll see you more and more in higher levels. Thank you so much for joining with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.